Hello, I'm Mike Pothier. I'm the Program Manager at the Catholic Parliamentary Liaison Office. And with me today I have Michael Hendrickse, who is the Provincial Electoral Officer for the IEC here in the Western Cape. We're going to dig a little bit into the preparations for the 2024 national and provincial elections. Michael, thanks very much for your time.
Hi, good afternoon, Mike, and thank you for the opportunity.
So we are pretty much a month away from, just over 4 weeks away from the elections. Are the preparations on schedule?
The preparations are on schedule. What we've been doing as the IEC, we've been recruiting our staff firstly. As you know, in this province we have just over 19,000 electoral staff that we have to recruit and then train. So that is well on its way. And then also in terms of our procurement of our materials. We have procured all the bulk material, for example, those booths that you see, the tables, etc. All those materials have been delivered at our provincial warehouses.
Now, in the midst of all that, we've got court challenges and various applications here and there. How does that sort of thing affect your preparations?
Look, it does affect us to a large extent, but there comes a time that we need to make certain hard decisions in terms of that. For example, that notwithstanding the fact that we may have some court challenges, and I know that there's some appeals going to the Constitutional Court, we needed to start producing the national ballot, for example, because remember, the national ballot goes around the world to all our embassies and missions around the world, etc. So you need to start doing that, and just generally printing capacity. We're printing over 90 million ballot papers, almost 30 million per ballot type. So we needed to start going with the printing of our ballots.
One of the big changes in this election compared to our previous ones is the presence of independent candidates. I know here in the Western Cape we have only one that has registered for the National Assembly election. There are a few more around the country. How has the introduction of independents affected the way these elections are going to be run?
I think it's firstly it's awesome that we have the opportunity for independents to contest. I think it just adds to the opportunity but also the choice that voters out there will have to decide who must represent them in Parliament. So for us, you always had regional representation, but it just meant in the past that the national ballot was just counted twice, once for the whole country and then once in terms of for the region from which you were. But I think overall it augurs well. But it also, I think the fact that we now have a third ballot focuses people on the need that says there are X number of seats reserved in the National Assembly for your province. So choose wisely who you want to represent the province in the National Assembly as well. It's just another opportunity.
So let's look at those ballots. 3 ballot papers, whereas previously we've only had 2. Everyone understood it was for the National Parliament and for the provincial legislature. Now we've got a regional national paper. Can you just explain to viewers what this all means?
So firstly, there are 400 seats in Parliament. So what the law says is that 200 of those seats must be divided up amongst the 9 provinces. And we call them regions simply to distinguish from provincial legislatures. So you could have 200. So what the IEC did is before the proclamation, we determined what are the number of seats reserved for each region in Parliament. So in the case of the Western Cape, there are 24 seats reserved in Parliament for people of the Western Cape to vote via a regional ballot. Eastern Cape is, for example, 25. The Northern Cape has 5 because of their relatively sparse population, and so it goes. So the first opportunity for voters will be to choose on their regional ballot who shall represent the interests of that province in Parliament. And you have a choice. There will be parties and independents listed on the regional ballot. But now, very importantly, each regional ballot differs from one region to another because there's different players that are contesting in those regional elections. So that is the first ballot that the voter will come across. The second ballot that the voter comes across in the booth will be the national PR ballot. It's called the compensatory ballot, but on that one it is only political parties who are contesting. So you'll have 2 chances to vote for the National Assembly, one for the region and one for the national PR. So those are the 2 ballots. And then your third ballot is really for your provincial legislature. Who do you want to govern your province? It's as simple as that. And on that third ballot, which is also a provincial ballot, then parties and independents will be contesting. In our province, we don't have independents, so there's 29 parties appearing on the provincial ballot.
Right. But in, I think, 4 of the other provinces, there are going to be independent candidates on the provincial ballot as well.
That is correct. I know, for example, in Limpopo, in Gauteng, there are independent candidates also contesting the provincial legislature ballots.
Now, voters are free to vote for one party or candidate on the national and a different one on the provincial. Is that correct? Splitting the vote.
Correct. And that is the best part of this election. Is so you can choose and say, look, to run the province, I support party X, or I want to support the individual because I believe in what he stands. And then you look at the National Assembly and say, okay, when it comes to national politics, who best can represent what you want to do? So you really have a choice of 3 ballots, and you can vote according to how you want.
Right. It's great to have that choice, but it's a new step. There's going to be a certain amount of confusion. A lot of people don't yet know that there are going to be 3 ballots. There's a concern that on voting day, we have queues, and no matter how efficiently they are managed, it does take a bit of time. And when people get into the actual voting station and they're confronted with 3 papers, they're going to start asking questions. What must I do with this one? How are you planning to handle that?
So what will happen is within the station, as the ballot papers are issued to the voter, the voting officer will explain to the voter what each ballot is. You know, that this is for Parliament, this is for the region, this one is, and the fact that you must make a choice on each one of them. All right, one vote. Yeah. And then when the voter obviously gets into the booth, if at that stage the voter says, look, I'm so confused, I need assistance here, they can call the presiding officer. The presiding officer will then call 2 party agents and any observer that's present and say, the voter wants assistance, I need to explain to her. So that the presiding officer always has to explain in the presence of agents or observers what the voter wants. Sometimes it may be a simple question, and in another case it will be that the voter says, look, I can't actually read and write, I need somebody to actually assist me with this. So there will be that opportunity. We are very much aware of the fact that given that it's 3 ballots, that a voter will take a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And remember, if you as a voter make a mistake, you can approach the presiding officer and say, oops, I made a mistake on this ballot, I want a different one. As long as the voter hasn't placed that ballot in the box, he or she can ask for another ballot. We will cancel that one. But importantly, you only have 2 choices. You can't keep on making the mistake. Yeah. Okay, so, but we can assist the voter in that regard. And that's part of our training that we also giving to our presiding officers to say, there are these situations, there are a number of parties who sound similar on the ballot paper, that look similar, the abbreviation. So yes, we're aware of that.
And there's 52 parties, if I'm correct, on the national compensatory ballot.
That is correct. There are 52 parties on the compensatory ballot. In our province, we have 29 parties on the provincial ballot. And on our regional ballot for the Western Cape, there will be 34 parties and 1 independent. And they're not all in the same order. That's the other thing that may confuse a voter. You know, you're not necessarily going to find your party on the same slot on each different ballot paper.
And I think that all of that sends a message to voters that even before getting to the polls, people need to educate themselves as best possible about what they need to do. The IEC website has a lot of information on this.
No, definitely. We will have the information with regard to the type of ballots, but when it comes to your choices, I think, and I think the media has played a very important role, because you've seen a number of these public engagements and on television, etc., like that, where for the first time members of the public are also being exposed to who there are a number of new parties, and so I think it's amazing that we can share that, and people that ultimately can make up their mind before they get to the station, hopefully, that this is how I'm going to actually vote, and do it accordingly.
Just finally on the 3 ballot question, I think one of the strengths of all of our elections up to now has been the fact that they're not just free and fair, but credible. People can believe in the outcome. It hasn't been rigged, in other words.
Yes.
Can we say that the introduction of a 3rd ballot is not going to change that at all?
No, it's not. Remember, Mike, in local government elections, for areas outside of the metro, they've always had 3 ballots.
Right.
You know, they voted for the ward, they voted for the local municipality, and they voted for the district. So outside of your metros, voters are used to having 3 ballots, 3 choices, all right? So we're introducing this for this time. So I think firstly, one, we are very clear, the same process we follow, ensuring that we can actually reconcile all the ballot papers that are issued, used, and unused, so that there's no sort of any sort of lost ballots going out there, etc. We use the voters roll to make sure that it's only persons who can vote. We use our voter management device to also track that, so that if we scan your name at the one voting station, if you go somewhere else, besides the fact that you're going to have your ink mark, it will also pick up and say, no, Mike has already voted at that station. So there are a number of measures we've put in place to ensure that the vote is secret and the vote is safe.
You also mentioned the presence of party agents, and that also is a great assurance that voters will know that the representatives of the parties that they support are going to be present in the voting stations and able to observe the process.
Very much so. And it's not only the parties, but even your independents will also have agents. And then don't forget the observers. We've accredited over 100 organizations already who will be deploying their own observers across the country too. So everything that we do will be observed. So the only place that the agent observer cannot be, obviously, is at the booth.
At the booth,
where persons are making their choice. But they can see that, you know, person's name is being marked off, that the correct number of ballots are being issued, etc., etc. So even the counting, what happens is we count at the voting station at 9 o'clock. When it closes, we close the doors. Those are everybody who's inside. Remain inside, and then we count, and the agents and observers are present. So the ballots are not moved somewhere to some location somewhere nobody knows. It's done there, and when we're done, we have a result slip, 2 result slips. One is placed on the door of the voting station where the public can see it and the political parties, and the second ballot, or a second result slip, is taken to our local office where it is scanned and captured.
Right. It's pretty much foolproof. As far as it can be.
As far as it can be. Look, we obviously are always looking at ways to ensure that the integrity of the election process is always safeguarded. And where necessary, we need to also ensure that persons who do transgress are actually prosecuted. I think that too is something that is important for us to see, that takes place.
So that's the kind of internal security of the voting system. Externally, we're fairly lucky that we don't have violent elections in this country. We generally have pretty peaceful elections, but there are incidents from time to time. Just say a few words about how the security cluster is assisting you with that.
Look, we work very closely with the South African Police Services and the security cluster. There is what we call a Prof Joints meeting every week where the IEC co-chairs, and we go through the process. They know where our voting stations are. We get updates in terms of which areas are high risk, and so on. Because the reality is that we live in a society where, for example, in Cape Town, you still have a lot of gang violence, and people are in a normal course afraid to go out. So what more on election day? So these are measures we need to make sure that people are feeling safe to come to the voting station and to vote as well. So we work very closely with them. The police services will escort the ballots, for example, when we are moving it from once we finish counting and we have to get it to our locals. So they render a lot of support. But it's not just about enforcement. What the IEC also does is it has a conflict management program. So what we do is we employ very senior, very skilled and qualified conflict mediators that we will then have in the province, across all the provinces, together with panelists. Panelists are local persons. They can be community leaders, ministers, whoever, that the people know. So if there is a situation that brews, we can deploy them to just diffuse it and to ensure that, notwithstanding, because a lot of times people, and rightly so, use elections as a means to focus their issues, and that's great. All we ask is don't stop the voting from taking place. So we have that process as well, because it's not just about enforcement, it's about also ensuring that communities feel that yes, they are being heard, and so we can also have a peaceful election.
And then you also have an electoral code of conduct. Is that something that all the parties and independents have to subscribe to?
Correct. There is an electoral code of conduct that all participating parties and independents have to comply with. In fact, they have to make a public pledge so that, and you may have seen that happening around the country, where political parties and independents pledge that they will uphold it, not only themselves but their supporters and members. And that too is critical, that the parties not only work together with the IEC but work amongst each other, so that they remove any potential points of conflict. For example, if you're going to hire a hall, there's only one hall in the area. So make sure you talk to one another so that your meeting doesn't end at 6 p.m. and mine starts at 10 past 6, so that a lot of supporters are coming and the passions are running high, etc. Those sort of things that we require political parties to also work amongst one another. And don't take off each other's posters, please.
Yes. Voting day is the 29th of May. There are 2 days set aside before that for special voting, the Monday the 27th, Tuesday the 28th.
Correct.
Who qualifies for special voting and how do they go about it?
Okay, so there are 2 categories of special votes. The first is to vote at your voting station on the 27th and 28th. And there anybody can really apply. There's no specific criteria. It's not an age restriction. It's not a job restriction. So if you just feel, look, I want to vote on the 27th, you can apply to the IEC. You go online. The process is very clear. And you simply say, I want to vote the day before, or the 2 days before, whatever days.
You must have some sort of a reason, though.
No, you don't need a reason.
No.
You don't. For a voting station, a special vote, you don't really need a reason. You just say, I can't vote, or I don't want to vote on election day. It's as very straightforward as that. So you just give us your ID number, because remember, nothing else changes. You're still going to your voting station. So that's the first category, and that's the overwhelming South Africans would use that opportunity. The second category is if you are infirm, disabled, or pregnant to the extent that you cannot get to the voting station.
Right.
In those cases, you can also apply for what we call a home visit. But it's limited then to those 3 categories. You cannot ask for a home visit simply because you feel like it. Or you think now, okay, my mom who's elderly is now going to get a home visit. I also want, you might as well, be here. We, for example, would apply for somebody who's a patient at a hospital. They can apply for a visit, and we will get to that hospital. We will work together with the hospital facility management. But the second category is very limited only to infirm, disabled, and pregnant persons who, due to their condition, cannot come to the station. Right. And again, they can apply online, www.elections.org.za. But importantly, applications close 5 p.m. on the 3rd of May. So get your application in, and we'll definitely want to assist you.
Right. Lastly, any other thoughts or reflections on our 7th national provincial elections? It's quite an achievement to have reached number 7, all orderly, free and fair, credible results. Is this going to be another one like that?
Well, that is certainly what we're striving to achieve. But firstly, I'd just like to thank all the thousands of ordinary South Africans who are working as voting station staff. These are not persons that are employed permanently by the IEC. They come aboard just before the elections. They work, they're housewives, retirees, unemployed, a lot of unemployed youth so they're all part of this. It's almost a citizens' election. And I want to take my hat off to them, because they'll be working long hours, not only during voting, but also in the night. So awesome to them. And I think that's part and parcel that makes our election so credible, because it's not just officials involved, it is locals that are running the elections, and I think that is awesome. So we're working towards that. I think we fairly, you mentioned about the fact that there's not massive violence during elections. Yes, there will be incidences, and we're hoping those will be minimized. But for the rest, I think the IEC has a bit of muscle memory and sort of systems in place to make sure that we can deliver on these elections. It's not going to be always perfect. We live in an imperfect society. We look around us and just look at the inequality, look at the lack of infrastructure in some of our areas, etc. So yes, but we will definitely deliver a free and fair election, so that at the end of the day, people can actually say, look, here, that is my government at the national level, the provincial level, and the political parties and independents can get on the business of running this country, and that we can hold them accountable for that.
Yeah, great. Michael Hendrickse, the Provincial Electoral Officer of the Western Cape, thanks very much for coming in today, and best of luck. Hope it goes very well.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks to you guys for your support.
Thanks. This interview was sponsored by the Seidel Foundation and News 24. I'm Mike Pothier. Thank you very much for watching.